Welcome, Internet, to the PixelPlay Podcast, your weekly podcast where we get together to talk about everything going on in the world of gaming. I am one of your co-hosts, Kaylan, aka Catastrophe, joined as always by my co-hosts, Adam at CS Radical and Chris at Gin and Chris. And joining us this week as a special guest is Nave from the Gaming Together podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about whether or not gamers are too hard and picky when it comes to the performance of their games, and is Xbox firing on all cylinders, or can they be doing better? With that being said, let's jump into it. I'm going to give the floor to our new friend, Nave. Nave, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you playing lately?
Not a whole lot about me, but I've been playing a lot of this game called Inscription. Have any of you guys played any of this?
I still need to buy that, or need to play it at least at some point. It looks like such a cool idea.
Oh, it's so good. I
haven't heard of this. What is it?
It's a card game roguelike kind of thing, and it's one of those kind of subversive games that the more you play it, the more the game changes, and it's definitely not what it seems whenever first. And that's as much as I want to say on the show. If you go over to Gaming Together Pod and listen to us, I've been ranting and raving about this game for about a month and a half now, and so it gets a little spoilery over on that side, but it's one of those games that you definitely want to go into completely blind and not aware of what's going on at all. And it's incredible. Try not to look at any screenshots or anything like that. Just let the game take you on a ride.
Nice. Yeah, I've actually, now that I see this, I've seen this game before, but I've not gotten into it yet. So cool.
Yeah,
and you're
huge one I want to try.
I'm huge into like customization and like really creepy narratives and like spooky situations, because if you could see the video there's the guy that you're playing against. He's a very creepy guy, and that's what hooks you at first, and then the game just slowly swallows itself whole, and it presents so many awesome different narrative choices and like interesting and unique gameplay mechanics and like ways to tell a narrative through a card game. It's so awesome, and this game's been out on the PC for a while now. Xbox just recently got it, which is why I've been playing it, and because I got to get my gamer score up. And
Oh, you're gonna fit so well on this show, man. Oh boy.
It's bad. I can barely play that Switch, because the only reason I'm playing the Final Fantasy on the Switch is because I don't care about trophies.
awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely been a game on my radar. It's one of those ones where it has that similar feel to, like, you know, a lot of games that we see now in the indie side of things, where you think you know what it is when you start playing it, and then you realize the longer and longer you play that you have no clue, and this game is just playing you like a fiddle until essentially you finish it, or I guess you think you finish it. It depends on the game.
Yeah, and if you are entrenched in, you don't have to like card games that much, but if you like Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic the Gathering, and I'm sure there are other like Easter eggs and stuff like that too, but there's so much love and admiration for those games, and all kinds of references. Like, something's just ripped straight from Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic the Gathering, like achievement names or situations you find yourselves in, or card types, or like keywords on cards are just Magic the Gathering keywords, but like moved around the same word. It's so fun. But I love roguelikes and stuff like that, and I love card games. So this has been absorbing me for a while now.
Nice. You mentioned your podcast, Gaming Together. You want to give a quick rundown, quick 30-second spiel of what that podcast is all about?
We try to do co-op games. I'm the crazy ranting guy, and my friend Philip, the other co-host, he is the one that keeps everything on the rails and tries to get me to finish a game if he can even get a hold of me. You guys saw firsthand how hard it is to message me and get a pithy response. But that's kind of the energy that we have over there on that show. We try to play a co-op game or multiplayer in general and cover it for the second hour of the show, and then the first hour we just kind of BS.
Nice. You'll fit in well here. Adam, what about you? What have you been up to? What have you been playing? It's been a while since we've chatted. What's new with you?
Yeah, it's kind of been a bit of a so-so kind of time. I mean, we're gonna probably be talking about this a lot in the next week or so, or next month, I should say, as we kind of wait for all the showcases to come in. But it's been kind of quiet on the new side of things in terms of games, apart from Jedi Survivor. But
thank you.
I didn't like Fallen Order, so it wasn't really on my radar. But like, well, of course, we know my bad taste in games. Yes. Jokes done. And with the amount of stuff that's not coming out, I mean, Dead Island 2 kind of piqued my interest, but not at the price point and not without a bunch of people to play. So right now we're in this kind of like weird state where nothing's vibing, and I'm kind of just waiting till either something gets surprise launched on us, kind of like what Hi-Fi Rush did, or at least until I think either July or August when the new Trails game comes out, Trails into Reverie. So I've kind of just been playing the old Trails of Cold Steel games again, just to kind of refamiliarize myself with the story, which playing the original now where I'm at is so weird because now I recognize all these things and being like, huh, that was super foreshadowy for 3 games later, but I never would have figured that out. And I mean, as a JRPG fan, it's nice to go back to and revisit stuff when you actually know already any ways to just completely break apart the system. So I'm barely halfway through the first game now, and I'm like, I know exactly what things I need, I know what spells I need, I know what attachments I need to make this character just completely broken, and we just wait until we collect all of it, and towards the end of the game walk up to the final boss and have a good laugh. But other than that, like, I'm still popping into MLB The Show just because that's like my odd, like, if I have a podcast on, I'll go listen to that and then play baseball because it's pretty mindless. I've stepped a little bit back into GTA Online because I've had friends getting back into it recently, so I've kind of just sort of peeked back into it a little bit. It's been kind of fun again, but again, it also reminds me too of how good Lord Rockstar wants you to spend so much money on that game if you can, and Lord knows you can't get me to do it. So it's kind of at that point where I'm just replaying a bunch of stuff and just waiting for something interesting to pique my interest, unless like Game Pass comes out with something again that kind of piques my interest. That was supposed to have been Redfall, but hey, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But other than that, I mean, Sony announced its new lineup for next month. There's a couple of interesting things in there, but nothing that tips the needle because most of the ones that would have I've already played. So we're kind of just in wait and see mode, and especially with PlayStation apparently having a showcase sometime at the end of this month, maybe, question mark. I guess we'll be seeing, but as for right now, it just feels kind of dead unless I just go ahead and try something randomly now.
Adam, have you heard of Ravenlock, I think it's called, that just
I
released
saw it on Game
Pass?
Pass. I haven't taken a look at it yet, though.
It's like, I haven't started it yet, but I did look into it. It's like a 3 to 5 hour third person like adventure game of a girl who gets pulled into basically like Wonderland, like Alice in Wonderland, and like there's all the like characters and stuff. I mean, it might be something to check out just because it's a quick, 3 to 5
Yeah, I've
hour
also got Infinite
adventure.
Guitars still sitting there on my Game Pass to try it at some point too. But again, it's just you need to have the urge to want to do something, and so far it hasn't really clicked yet. So we're just kind of waiting to see until it's like a boring day where it's like 1 PM and nothing's happening, and you're just like, well, I guess I can try this and see what happens.
The voxel style of that game is incredible. I really like the art and the aesthetic of it. I liked the game that they had before it. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but I can't off of the top of my head. But that was like a light JRPG that was only like 7 to 10 hours long, which is awesome to be able to crunch a JRPG into that compact of a package. If you also are looking for kind of creepy looking games, that Benedict Fox game looks kind of cool, or The Last Case of whatever the hell it is.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, the last case, I think, of Benedict Fox or something like that. Yeah, that looks
Yeah,
pretty
that was
cool.
like that Cthulhu style kind of detective game, wasn't it?
It looks like it. I don't know if that's exactly what it is.
I
But
haven't
it's
played it.
definitely the style of it.
Yeah.
And also Inscription. Inscription play.
I'm gonna look past. I mean, Adam, we expect from you to have like bad taste and opinions on games. I'm gonna look past the fact that Nave said he doesn't like Star Wars, Jedi Fallen Order, or Survivor. But Chris, man of taste, how you liking it? I know what you're playing.
I'm playing Jedi Survivor.
Yeah,
course
you are.
I am.
Yeah, you
Oh
are.
my god, I actually had a small story right before a panic that I wasn't going to get to play
Mhm.
because I had a bit of an argument with Sony. So I bought Jedi Survivor, and it was mostly on a gift card, like on my wallet on the PS5.
Mhm.
Paid a little bit on my credit card, but when I checked my credit card, it wasn't actually Sony's fault. It was my the app is not great for my bank, I guess, because when I was scrolling, when I refreshed, it doubled the line. So it
Mm.
showed I was actually charged like $18, like nothing. It was just the leftover for the game, but it showed it twice. So I disputed the one claim, and my bank went back and was like, "Hey, this is being disputed." They disputed it, and they were like, "Yep, it's showing twice here," because I took a screenshot and stuff. They're like, "So we've refunded it." Well, it wasn't twice. Just the app showed it twice. When they refunded it, Sony was like, "Hey, either your account's been hacked or you're trying to get a game for free, so we're locking your account." And this was 2 days before Jedi Survivor came out, and I was like, "If I miss playing this day one, I will pass out. Like, I don't even know what I'm going to do with myself." But luckily, Sony, all they do is they refund the game, give you what credit you had put towards it back, unlock your account, and then I just rebought it. And that was like 16 hours before I could actually finally play it. I was definitely nervous for like a good 24 hours there. But I'm
Nice.
loving Jedi Survivor. I like story wise, everything. Like I'm not sure if I like it more than Fallen Order. It's hard to Jedi Fallen Order. It's
Yeah,
hard to
you're right.
tell. It is like it is slightly different. Like they've obviously gone with the story. It's not going to be the exact same thing. It's kind of a continuation. Obviously, they'll go whatever directions they go story wise. Story wise, I'm not sure which one I like more because I mean they're so close, right? It's basically just the same story but continuing. But yeah, I'm when it comes to the story, when it comes to the I mean everything like story, the gameplay, like it's so fun. Just you really feel like a Jedi in some of
You
these
do.
things that you do. Like they introduce a couple more mechanics and stuff that I won't get into just in case there's spoilers, but you start doing things and you're like, oh man, like wall run, jump, grab this, wall run, jump, do this, backflip, lightsaber this, like, oh, it's just so satisfying. And especially as you unlock new things and it just starts to open that world more, much like the Fallen Order did.
Mhm.
Same idea. Get to a planet, you can do certain things, but a lot of stuff's locked out until you get different abilities, and then you do, and then all of a sudden you feel like a Jedi god. And I'm kind of at that point in the game, and it's oh god, it's just so satisfying, so satisfying.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I'm further behind than you are, but I'm absolutely loving it. Like I like the fact that one, the customizations are much better than the first one in the sense that there's more than just, hey, what color poncho do you want? Like you can actually make your character almost look completely different however you want. I love that. And I love the different like fighting styles and stuff. So the two questions I wanted to ask you, one, which stances do you prefer for the lightsabers?
Oh.
What are your two go-to?
So I have used all of them, and I won't say
Mhm.
how many there are, just in case you aren't that far and you see how many there actually are.
Yeah, I think they're
Um,
at, I've got four.
Okay. So I've used all of them, and it's because there's a trophy kind of associated with each of them. Nothing
Mhm,
difficult, just like unlock a part, an ability within that stance, use it
mhm,
10 times. And I just naturally was doing that because I wanted to try every stance. And
mhm.
I loved each one of them. Um, but I still have always just the single like lightsaber blade, like true like Jedi, just original OG kind of style. I
Mhm.
always have that one. And so far right now, I've got the dual blade, like the two separate
Okay.
blades, like what's on the video for anybody who's
Yeah.
watching the VOD. I've been using that one as well. Again, it was just one of the trophies that I needed, had it, and
Mhm.
I don't know, it kind of just feels cool to just be fighting a boss and then you're just using the one lightsaber and then you're like, nah, and then you just bring out the other one and start going on that boss. Oh,
You know what it
just
really
Yeah.
reminds me of is the Yakuza games, which I'm an insane fanatic of Yakuza. I don't know if any of you guys play that, but
Yeah.
I may have
Adam's
played
on your
all of
back.
them.
a handful of them do have fighting style shifts, and the one that just came out, like a Dragon Inshin, the remake, also it's like almost every single stance of the four that I've seen in this game so far are the same in Inshin. So I would really want to play the one with the blaster. Also, just thinking about a Jedi with a blaster, I really don't like Star Wars that much, but I'm pretty sure that's like not correct, right? Like they don't normally do that.
No,
no.
not really.
So that's cool. Like it's
It's a
like
very
oh cool,
uncivilized weapon.
subversed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really cool. Like the way that they kind of played up, like Cal kind of almost feels like a mixture of like a Jedi meets a little bit of like a Han Solo kind of thing, and I like it.
yeah, I
So
really liked the blaster stance. I used that one
yeah.
for a while, and man, like some of the combos that you would see, like just while fighting, like just even basic attacks, like nothing anything special, just some of the things that would appear, like you're hitting with the
Hip shooting.
lightsaber, and then all of a sudden you hip shoot while you're, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's just so satisfying.
For me, the two I've been using is I've been doing the dual wield lightsabers, and I've been using the crossguard as well. So I use the dual wield for like the fast, quick, taking down like large groups, and then the crossguard for dealing with larger enemies. Second question I had for you, Chris, is what color lightsaber did you go with?
Orange.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I am a classic blue lightsaber guy. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I even when I built my own lightsaber there, when I was in Disney World, I was like, I'm gonna do orange. I can't wait. And I was an idiot and I didn't look into it before. And I was like, they don't even have orange. It's in Fallen Order. What are you doing, Disney? Keep up. Like, what the heck? So
that's weird. It's in like KOTOR too, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think it is. Yeah.
It's always been rumored that they're gonna have it later. So you can change the crystal out of it and make it be whatever color. You don't have to like get a whole new lightsaber. You can customize it and get new parts and actually play around with it, much like in this game. Which
you
is
can get a bootleg one.
Yeah, you can also do that too.
Yeah, just put a Jolly Rancher in there. I'm sure it's the same thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
what are they not purple either? Like, what the hell's Disney doing?
The real important question is: Disney put in a rainbow one yet?
That would be a difficult lightsaber to pull off, I think.
I think you're saying
that's like a fucking what is it? A RGB keyboard that's just constantly fluctuating in color.
Yeah, so
I was thinking of like
it's not a lightsaber; it's a light razor.
I was thinking of like the ones that you like used to see at like carnivals and like the fairs, where it was like just that guy who had like the plastic one with all the different colors. That's what I was thinking.
Or like the sorting hat in Harry Potter. Whenever you grab it, it just changes the color. It's like, oh, you're a blue guy. Oh, interesting. I'm not judging you.
One thing I wanted to bring up with you guys, like I'm enjoying Jedi Fallen Order, and for the most part, I think people are liking it, but there was a lot of backlash that was coming out with this, that people were complaining that it wasn't performing well. They were kind of, complaining that, oh, the performance isn't good, the FPSs are low. And then we've been hearing this with Redfall, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I was playing the game, and like, I wouldn't say it was the smoothest game. I was playing it on quality, not performance. And I was finding it fine. Like definitely not the smoothest game. And I did try the performance, and it was a little wonky, but not game breaking. And so I kind of wanted to talk to you guys of, is it a situation that like, are we justified in terms of having these criticisms of games, or are we just getting way too critical of games now? Like if things don't have 60 FPS, if they're not ray tracing, like, are we just getting spoiled as gamers, and are we being too critical? Or is there an argument to be made that no, these are basic expectations, and falling short of those is unacceptable? Because for me, I kind of was like, this is a great game, and I think that the level of backlash they were getting is a little ridiculous. It was a great game. I didn't find it was terribly buggy, and I think that just these were sort of nitpicks. Where do you guys fall?
I feel like it's on a case-by-case basis for sure, and I think that everything is subjective. So unfortunately, I'm the worst fence sitter of all time. I'm always ending up right there in the middle. But I think that you want to look at the reviewers that you trust, and if they are hyping the game up even beyond the performance issues, like if you're into RPGs, you watch Mr. Matty Plays, and he's saying this game is good, so it's like, okay, well, I trust that guy. So it's hard to separate the performance and the gameplay, but as if the gameplay, because gameplay usually is king in these kinds of things. Some of the most buggy, crappy games are like some of the most popular things on Twitch, right? And it's hard to separate that, especially if you're just watching. But like whenever you were saying you played it in quality mode instead of performance mode, I like a little bit. I was like, oh, how are you doing this to yourself? It's got to be in 60, but that's what I am, and I'm super entrenched in the ecosystem. Like whenever I watched a friend play Hogwarts Legacy, and they immediately switched it to quality mode in 30 frames and with ray tracing, and the game was chugging outside of the castle, and I'm like, they're gonna complain, but they were just having a good time flying around. I couldn't believe it. And sometimes we kind of lose the side of the forest and the trees with that kind of thing when you get really entrenched in the hobby, and I think a lot of people need to step back.
Yeah, because it really does depend on who we're talking about. Like if you're big into what Digital Foundry does, you're gonna care a lot about quality, so it's a whole different story. With the frame rate issue, because which game is it that wasn't coming out of the box with 60 frames? Was it Redfall that was only 30?
Redfall. Yeah.
It's stuff like that people go, well, wait, we expect 60 now because that's become the norm. So that's a red flag to people immediately.
I would like to jump in right there. They said that it was going to be 60 before it released, and then they got it. Even the on
so
the
on
box
top
it
of that,
said,
it was them going back on their word.
yeah, I think it was more that because on the box itself it says it's in 60, and they had to put stickers on it so they wouldn't get sued that said not 60 frames on release, like it's going to be in a patch down the line. And that right there is like, oh, okay, I understand. That's not good.
I think
But
even in general, though, like if we found out that, I don't know, let's say Spider-Man 2, when that comes out on PlayStation, if they say it's only got a 30 frames mode, people will be like, why? Because we figure now, like, given the power, especially of both the PlayStation 5 and the Series X, that the expectation is you should be able to make a 60 frame setting somehow. Like, if it even has to be 1080p, whatever, we'll deal with it. The frame rate still is important to some people because now that we've had the 60 frame perspective for a lot of our games as console gamers, because if you're a PC gamer, you're like, I've had this forever. What are you guys talking about? But for console gamers, that wasn't a thing we had for the longest time up until like the old Pixel days, because they used to be 60 frames or even more back then. But it's been 30 frames since 3D. And in most cases, it wasn't even 30 back then. So, there was a point where we didn't know what 60 frames looked like. And now that we have it, when you flip between, like with God of War or Horizon or any other game like that, and you flip between the two, it's pretty noticeable. And given the fluidity of 60 frames, I think people have now become accustomed to it to the point that when it's not there, it's very jarring for a lot of people in the way that, it didn't used to be because, well, we didn't know any better. If a game ran, like, had a few frame dips here and there at 30 frames, you'd sort of notice it, but unless it was egregious, like we're talking below, like, low 20s or even beyond that, then you really pay attention. But like 30 to 27, you didn't notice much of anything. But now when you go from 60 to 30, it's pretty obvious. So I think when that happens immediately, that's a whole issue. In terms of buggy games in general, though, I think I agree that it's dependent on the case. It has to depend on like what the bugs are. There's a difference between a game that, once in a blue moon, it might chug for a second, or maybe, something pops in out of frame way in the background. And then there's a game like Cyberpunk, which there was more than a few little glaring issues when that game came out. So I think it really does depend on what it is, because no game is going to come out completely free of bugs, no matter how good the game is anymore. Especially with these big experiences we have. You make a game that's more than 10 hours, you think there's a chance that game's going to come out picture perfect? Not a chance. But it's a matter of, did they clean it up enough that, worst case scenario, it might crash once randomly, but there's not much you can do about that sometimes. But like, if we're talking about, say, what a lot of people have seen with Redfall or the PC version of Jedi Survivor, like those are stories where it's like, that's not acceptable. Especially for AAA, that's unacceptable.
I like the Cyberpunk callback because I played Cyberpunk on the Xbox One X when it first came out, like maybe on the first or second patch, and I enjoyed it. Oh, I enjoyed it greatly, and I didn't really have too many like game-breaking bugs. The game was obviously all over the place. It was way worse than what Redfall currently is right now. But it's the experience that you're wanting and the experience that the game is delivering to you with the mechanics and the systems that the developers have built into the game. Where like if Redfall is it's a lot better off than Cyberpunk was, but I actually will enjoy playing Cyberpunk because I don't know where else I would get this experience. Whereas Redfall, it is almost the generic nature of the gameplay. The art aesthetic and the character models and all of that stuff, like that's beautiful and everything, but for a lot of people, like I said before, gameplay is king. And whenever you're just playing kind of a Far Cry game with like a handful of enemy variants and stuff like that, the bugs are a lot less acceptable than whenever you're playing Cyberpunk in this very unique setting, very unique world with very intricate role-playing mechanics.
Yeah, it's definitely possible for a game to distract you from a lot more of a buggy nature to it. But it really depends on what it is and what the bugs are. Sometimes, no matter how good a game is, there are just glaringly obvious ones that you can't ignore. But that's pretty far and few between. Like, if it's a 9 to a 10 out of 10 level game in terms of how fun it is, you can mostly accept almost any sort of bug that's thrown at you that isn't, so egregious to the point that, like, it's deleting saves on you or something like that. But, like, if the game is emitting 6 or 7 even, and it has just a bunch of bugs for it, not only you like, it's okay, like I don't hate it, but it's not great. And then you see crash, pop-ins left and right, AI that doesn't work properly, mechanics that are failing at times. Like when all that starts to come together and your only thoughts are, well, I mean, this is an okay game at best, then you're going to definitely talk about the bugs way more than if the game is, the story's really engaging you and the gameplay is a lot of fun and maybe the voice acting is kind of selling, even with how buggy maybe the graphics sometimes look. But if there's something else to divert your attention, it can still work out. And I think that, like you said, it's really going to come down to what are all the parameters we're talking about and how egregious are the bugs, because that really depends on what your initial reaction is. And even then, it's still dependent on the user, because some people are obviously a lot more forgiving. If it's a title, you mentioned the Hogwarts Legacy description there. I mean, if you're a big Harry Potter fan, you're ignoring a lot of things because you're just happy you got the game that you always wanted. Whereas if it was just some random indie title of the same kind of idea, but it just didn't have any name recognition to it, might be a whole different story with that same player too. You just don't know until you actually play it yourself.
Yeah, I think definitely when it comes to bugs, do the bugs ruin somebody's gameplay experience? And everybody's gameplay, what they want, what is fun for them, everything, it's going to be unique to that individual person. So yes, Cyberpunk for one person, like Nave, you loved it. Kaylan, you were in the same boat. I know that. Like, even if it was where every time you turned around, there was 17 cops literally every 2 seconds behind you and making the game impossible to progress, you were
It's
still having
charming.
fun. It's charming. Yeah. Yeah. And that's like going to be with a lot of games, right? Like, and it just, we'll hear a lot about it more when it's a AAA game, because a lot of people will build their expectations leading up to the game. And then as soon as it doesn't hit those expectations, that's when everybody will kind of freak out.
And even on top of that, we always got to remember that this is an age where in social media, constantly being negative about something is going to get you more eyes anyway. So if there's anything wrong with anything, you'll point it out immediately and start putting just video after GIF after video after post, just to show, like, especially if it's an Xbox exclusive or a PlayStation exclusive, you want to do that because you want to stir the console war factions to go at each other again, because again, that's more clicks. So it's also that part too of, like, if it's a bigger company doing that stuff, if it's a bigger, influence or something like that, then there's that part of it. If you're a small time gamer too, you're just doing it because you want to engage in the war because you found your side, you want to fight for it. So there's just so many factors that go with it that it's like, it's even hard to tell, like, if the person making the ideas is even trustworthy with it too. So you only kind of just trust the people that you, like you said earlier at the top there, Nave, anybody that you're like actually trusting in the time that you've done. If there's certain channels that you pay attention to, certain podcasts, certain reviewers, that's where you start getting that rapport and you start, gaining that trust and being like, okay, well, if you're saying this about this, you also said that about this thing, that matches up, that seems to be consistent. Whereas with so many other people, if it's just some random user online, or if it's, a company like IGN where there's 37 different people reviewing things, it's kind of hard to get a feel for everything, because you can't tell what's a clickbait and what's just somebody who's out of their element playing something that they normally wouldn't and is having, a little bit more harsher criticism or even a lighter criticism, depending on what it is. It's always hard to tell.
There's a really awesome video game donkey video. Whenever he got a lot of backlash for some game, he always gets backlash for something. He reviews games in a comedic fashion on YouTube. If you guys don't know, I don't know who the hell doesn't know video game donkey, but he notoriously doesn't like JRPGs, and he makes a really excellent point where because he reviews a JRPG, bashes it, and everyone's like, "Yep, of course," and then you move on to the next thing. But occasionally he'll like get Persona 5, and he just gushes about how much he enjoyed his experience with it, and that means a lot to people who watch Video Game Donkey on a regular basis. They're like, "Oh, this might be a game I might like because I'm like him, and I don't like turn-based games, but he loves this game."
Or if you're a JRPG player, you look at that and go, "That's probably the best one I'll play in the next like couple of years." Then, if that's the case, if even he likes it.
Yeah. And to the people who, I feel like I'm running over people, I'm sorry, but
No,
you
you're good.
mentioned before the console warriors that are dunking on Redfall right now. Where's my you sons of bitches? Look at me. Look at my eyes right now, okay? I went on a rant on the episode that's coming out this Friday. I went on a really long rant about this, so I'm not going to go on a rant here. But if you think that this AAA IP, just because it's exclusive to Microsoft, is failing, is good for the video game industry, and it's dunking on Game Pass, and it's like showing the entire industry like what's what, that is the literal last thing that you should be rooting for. A
Yeah,
new
if
AAA
you're a
IP.
Sony pony, you want Microsoft to succeed because it's going to make Sony do better too.
But on top of that, the fact that just even without all the console stuff, the fact that a new AAA IP is floundering right now, that's all of the publishers are watching Redfall right now. They're watching what's happening. It's like if you stick your neck out, if you're not making Call of Duty 247 and you're sticking your neck out to make a new IP and you don't just knock it out of the park, you spend all of this money and all of this time and all of these resources making this game and it does terrible and it just tanks your reputation because Arcane has a sterling reputation before this. Some people didn't like Deathloop, but that's whatever. But it's like before all of these games they were critical darlings, right? They were not commercial successes but critical darlings. And now they're not commercial successes and their reputation's in the freaking dirt. I try to say mud.
No, you're good. No, I think you're totally right. Like it raises a point. Like if you look at the biggest games that have sold this year, they're sequels and licensed IP. Like it's Hogwarts, it's Star Wars, and like those are
And
the
then
two.
every EA sports game under the
Yeah,
sun.
yeah. So I think like
Remakes.
for the
remakes.
brokenness aspect of it and stuff, I think it's just you get a vocal minority who like the people who are enjoying the game aren't taking their time away to go and be like, I love this game. I don't know what you guys are talking about. It's the people who want to be miserable, the people who aren't enjoying the game are going to take the time out to echo those sentiments. It's not the people who are enjoying it.
Yeah, and at the end of the
So-
day, like we want every game, and it's kind of indicative on the industry too, because with all these day one patches that we see all the time, and how games truly aren't working correctly until like minimum a month, and sometimes like months before after release, it's just showing that either games are getting too big, which has been I've had this conversation so many times that maps need to get smaller because they're just getting ridiculous.
Mhm.
Or it's just the industry is realizing that they don't have to put a complete game out there to make sales because look at EA Sports. They copy and paste their sports games every year and it still generates millions upon millions of dollars. So the industry is looking at that and being like, oh, so we don't have to try that hard. We'll still make a crap ton of money. What's the difference? So, and that's what makes it frustrating when we hear stories about like Hi-Fi Rush, for example, that they didn't make as much money as they were hoping it to. And I'm sitting there being like, so great, there's their excuse now to not do that kind of stuff again. In the same way that like, you're saying with Redfall, if Redfall doesn't do well, that just strays eyes away from creating new IP again, and just means we're going to get more sequels and remakes and remasters and just the same stuff over and over again.
I think there's a
complain.
There's a counter argument to that whole like Hi-Fi Rush not doing its sales numbers. I don't know what Microsoft was expecting in terms of Hi-Fi Rush having good sales numbers. I mean,
well, I think it also goes in the thing of like it's the Game Pass conversation, which is a whole
right. That's
other
what I was going to kind of say.
conversation
Like,
too, right?
is Xbox really expecting to sell games at this point when they release them on Game Pass right away? So, I think that's actually probably a good way to segue into it. So the other thing that came up in the last couple of weeks was, and Nave kind of brought, we've all been kind of talking around it, is Redfall and the tumultuous release that it has had, not getting good reviews, kind of getting bombed and dunked, and it's just not doing well. And I don't want to dunk on that. I haven't played Redfall. I'm not going to sit here and be like, Redfall's a terrible game. I've heard what people are saying about it. I am not the Xbox guy. I am the resident Sony pony on this show, so I don't feel it's my place to speak
nemesis.
about Redfall. Yeah, welcome to my lair. You're in my house now. No, and that's why we brought you on, Nave, because I mean we are all to a varying degree Sony people. I think Adam and Chris both have Xbox Game Pass and are probably the more agnostic of us, of the three of us, and I'm firmly entrenched in the PlayStation camp. So and I've talked about this as much as I'm a Sony pony. The one thing I always want is a healthy Xbox. The one thing that Sony needs to succeed is competition from Xbox. And you can see when Xbox is not competing, you get a crappier Sony. And so I wanted to talk to you guys though. Like, I feel like looking on the outside, looking in, it doesn't seem like Xbox is firing on all cylinders. It is not living up to its potential. And so I wanted to bring Nave in because Nave has, experience and he is in the Xbox ecosystem. And I just wanted to get more voices. Like, do we think that Xbox is firing on all cylinders? Is this the best that Microsoft can do, or are they kind of still trapped in the Xbox One era? What do you guys think? Like, I just feel like between the mediocre, like they've had some good games. I'm not gonna take it away. Like Forza's been good, but like Halo did not resonate well. Redfall, obviously it didn't go well. Like we're not seeing this sort of hype around Xbox as we are. And I'm starting to hear people say like, hey, I regret getting an Xbox, or now like, should you even get an Xbox at this point? And so where do you guys fall? Like, is Xbox living up to potential, or are they kind of half-assing it or need to do more?
I
I'll
think
let
they
Nave,
put
Nave start.
themselves in a very interesting position. That's good because I just jumped right in there, and I.
No,
But
I was going to give it to you. Yeah,
good.
you're going to start. Yeah, go.
they're in a very interesting position with their Game Pass thing. They're right now they're trying to innovate on the industry hand over fist with the giant bag that Microsoft gets from all the other sections of their company, right? They're trying to because they innovated with the original Xbox with the Ethernet cable and the hard drive, and they did it again with the 360 with online matchmaking and the profiles and the achievement system and all kinds of stuff. They're crazy innovators. Something that Sony really has had a hard time doing as far as like hardware and software. Like they're really good at innovating within a very focused game like a game archetype. But they do the best. They're honestly some of the best AAA games that come out are coming from Sony's camp,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
everybody
Sony's not
knows
going to
that.
innovate anymore to the same sense with hardware because, well, DVD players aren't exactly going to be a big breakthrough anymore in the industry now that everything's online.
Yeah, and if you look at the generations, each one is trying to innovate greatly on the previous one. The Xbox One was trying to bring us into the digital age, and if the Xbox One released in the place of the Xbox Series, I think it would be a lot more. It wouldn't be because all the DRM and everything, we weren't ready for that. But they were forward thinking and they knew that we were crossing into this digital era. It was a lot the ratio between physical and digital gamers was a lot more even back then. But now it's almost hand over fist digital. I've already converted it over to digital because all of our games are just codes on a CD, and they're pushing even further into that with Game Pass, and they're trying to change the industry with each and every generation that they put out. Now, is that good change? I'm not entirely sure because we're not fortune tellers, but the value to the customer is incredible. And for the people who are on the fence for consoles, because there's always a new wave of people showing up. And a lot of people go into Nintendo for a while and then they dip their toes into the big boy consoles. And whenever they do that, you can look over on the Xbox corner and see Game Pass with all of these games for a small fee. Sony's obviously intimidated because they're following suit with that as well. And since Sony's usually the one kind of following in the footsteps of whoever's kind of coming up with the new and big shiny idea, it's really interesting seeing the way that's because Sony obviously can't do that, right? Like release day one games under their service. So with Microsoft doing that over there and forsaking the day one sales of games, you would think that it would be a lot more of a hindrance. But you look back at Forza with the early pass for the $100 version, and like how many like 1 million people paid the $100 version just to play the game like 3 days early. Like that is probably going to slowly become a model that Game Pass introduces, and I think that kind of model is going to seep into the greater industry as a whole. Like it's already happened with a couple of AAA games. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I play Hogwarts Legacy was one.
Hogwarts, yeah. It was like 3 days ahead if you got the collector's
Yeah,
edition.
MLB
Yeah.
The Show had the similar thing too. Get it 3 days early.
That's a Sony published game, and so it's really interesting, like the way that they're innovating and moving the industry in a direction. I don't know if that direction is forward or not, but the biggest hindrance I see, which is something that we've been dancing around, is that the games coming out of Xbox's first party are seemingly mediocre, but I feel like a lot of these like larger games are missing, but the smaller games are hitting. And the Xbox is slowly becoming this kind of indie darling machine. And the Game Pass is becoming kind of an indie curator, you know? Like I am really excited for it's like more like the fifth wave of Inscription getting into people's purview because it was introduced into Game Pass. Like Death's Door or like Cult of the Lamb might get, but another game, Signalis, which was my game of the year last year.
I had that earlier, and I love that game. And I'm not good
Oh
with
my
horror
God.
games, but it does it so well.
It's incredible throwback to Resident Evil and Silent Hill, the PlayStation 1 era. But yeah, this is I've been going on for a minute, so I'll wrap it up here. But it's like
No.
the ecosystem that Xbox has established is really interesting to me because they understood that in the switch to the digital era, the PlayStation won hand over fist. And that was like Phil Spencer said in an interview last week, that was the worst generation to lose because now people are deeply entrenched in their ecosystems with their digital libraries. I have 1,600 games on my Xbox. I'm not going to just go over to Sony because Xbox made a couple of bad games because all of my damn games are over here. So it's like Microsoft sure like completely knows that. And so they're trying to win a different kind of war, and that is the subscription war, where you have an easy kickoff point with Game Pass.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like it's really what you're looking for. I mean, we've said before, if you're right now looking for the big AAA experience, Sony was where you were going. If you wanted honestly the best deal, and this is even before Sony fought back with their, monthly service now, Xbox was just without question the deal. It was just an absolute steal. The amount of games that I have not had to pay for, essentially, and have been able to try, especially games on the indie side that I would never try. Games like Crosscode, games like Beacon Pines, games I would never have taken a look at. But because they're just sitting there after me paying what essentially is like me paying for PlayStation PlayStation Plus anyway, just for another small fee. And I'm looking at that being like, yeah, I'll give that a crack at it. It looks kind of interesting. And I end up walking out with like a game that I think is one of my favorites all year. Like, again, Eastward was my game of the year last year, and that was a Game Pass game I never would have tried. So it's just one of those things where it really depends on what you're looking for. From a business perspective, is what Microsoft doing actually helping them right now, whether the games are succeeding or not, like Redfall? I have no idea. I'm not a business advocate. I have no perspective on this stuff. But as a consumer, I don't give a shit what their business prospect is as long as it keeps doing what they're doing right now because it's working for me. It's amazing. The amount of games that are at my fingertips at any time, whether it's new or old, are just exponentially bigger than anything I've ever seen before. And does it mean that a couple of big games that, like Redfall, potentially Starfield in a few months, depending on how that rolls out, and many, many others, because I know Hellblade 2 is going to be coming at some point. There's obviously like the games that maybe 5 years down the pipeline because they couldn't help themselves but announce games like Elder Scrolls 6 and Avowed and Fable and games that just seem like they have no release date anytime soon. But maybe those all end up being duds. Does it honestly matter at this point for me personally? No. And I think for most customers, it probably doesn't either. It's more of just a disappointment because it's just one less thing to look forward to. Because I doubted Redfall, but I was still sitting there being like, I hope I'm wrong. I hope this game is amazing because it's just one more thing I have at my fingertips now. And especially with it being a multiplayer game, that's something else I can play with people. And it didn't work out that way. But as it stands, like, if the sacrifice I have to deal with as a consumer is that their biggest games may be like 7s and 8s at best, I'll take it because there's a bunch of 8s, 9s, and 10s that they just randomly pop on every month, and I absolutely adore, and I'm getting that for a small price. So for me as the consumer, they're still kicking ass. It's just, if the question is, who's kicking ass at AAA releases more? Well, that's Sony. Who's kicking ass overall? And it depends on how you're weighing it, honestly. It depends on what you're interested in most as a consumer in this market.
I would like to pin right at the end of that. The reason why Game Pass and Microsoft's ecosystem is such a great and amazing deal for the consumer in the first place, it's not because Microsoft is an altruistic multi-trillion-dollar company. It's because they're getting their ass kicked and they gotta do something. Like they have to compete in some way and they have to take some losses on the chin because if they continue the status quo, they're gonna take more than just losses. They're gonna lose the entire kit and caboodle.
Yeah, this is something I've talked about before, is that like I don't think Xbox Game Pass is sustainable at its current price. I think it's the Netflix model. They're looking to get the market share, they're looking to be the dominant one, and you will eventually see it increase to a realistic price. I am, once again, Sony Pony here. I'm actually at the opposite thing. Like I think they're struggling. Like their thing is they need to be gaining ground, and I don't think that they're necessarily pulling it in. I think one of the things that really pulls someone into a console ecosystem is more or less, what is exclusive there, whether it's Nintendo with its Zeldas and Mario games, whether it's PlayStation with its Horizons and God of Wars. I don't see Xbox having that. Like, sure, they have Game Pass, and Game Pass is great in terms of the breadth of stuff that you get, but there's nothing exclusive there. Like, as a PlayStation fanboy, I don't feel like I'm missing out in terms of not having Game Pass, right? Like the
Yeah.
having to get a system and then okay, I have access to these games. Like just because they're there, like I mean, yeah, I have a huge collection, but Netflix has a huge collection of stuff too. There's some gold in there, but there's also just a lot that I don't necessarily need. And granted, I'm an old man and I don't even use the PlayStation Plus Extra, whatever the hell it's called. For me, it's like their games are what's going to drive people to the console. I don't think just by saying, "Hey, we have a cheap platform," is enough. I think that there is
the door, but you need to follow up. And right now,
it.
with all of the acquisitions they have, the fact that nothing's coming out in terms of a major AAA
That's the
section
thing.
is baffling.
Well, the thing is, it's a twofold problem for them. They have a very slow trickle, and they've came out before and said, "Hey, we've got like the initiative. We've got all these studios that are working, and we're not seeing anything big come out of it. And what we're seeing come out of Xbox that is big is kind of lackluster, right? Like Forza is great. That's probably the best game on the system. You have like Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is great too. But like Halo came and went. We have not heard anything from Fable. I like Redfall came out and that kind of tripped as it came in. I don't really have high hopes for Starfield. I think Starfield is going to be a not a bad game, but I think it's going to be a disappointment from what people are expecting. I think the Bethesda that we've seen recently is far different from the Fallout 3, Fallout 4. Fallout 4 even wasn't hit, but like it's not the same Bethesda. And so I'm not seeing anything that's compelling someone to get an Xbox and play other than just, hey, there's these other great games you can get for this price. And I don't think there's anything that's stopping Sony from saying, hey, we can do that too. Plus, you'll also get our first party exclusives. And once that's done, I think that would be a death blow for Microsoft. But I don't think the Game Pass model is sufficient that it can support Sony style AAA games. Like I think Sony depends a lot on that. Hey, we have this game. We are going to sell a huge amount right off the gate. We'll make our money there, and we'll also get that residual income from people continually buying it as it goes on sale. And I don't think that. And I mean, I'm not in boardrooms. I don't know this, but I don't think that the model that Microsoft has, where it's just, hey, we're going to throw this out into the ether, and then people will play it, might pick up, but we're not going to see any revenue other than just people getting these subscriptions, like getting more or less subscriptions. And at some point, that's going to saturate. That I don't know if that supports large AAA exclusives like Sony's framework does.
I mean, at this point, it seems like it's just keeping them afloat until things start firing again, which we thought was going to start happening once we finally got through the pandemic years, where so much was just getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And so far, it still hasn't. And I know there's a lot of Xbox gamers right now that are looking into June being like, man, that showcase better be showing off a lot of stuff because we're waiting. But where is it?
Showing doesn't mean anything because Xbox has shown us lots of things before that have not.
Well, what I mean is showing things in 12 months because it's been so quiet. Like we know that the Perfect Dark game exists. We know that Fable exists. We know that Outer Worlds 2 exists. We know that Avowed exists. We know that Elder Scrolls 6 exists. They don't have dates, and we're pretty sure they're not even going to be next year. So June is going to be a big thing too. I mean, June's going to be big for almost everybody. I mean, everybody's expecting a lot here, but for Xbox especially, they need to come out and not only show that they are the platform where everything is at, but they need to show that the things that are only at that platform are also big time experiences. Because right now, Sony just basically walks out and be like, Spider-Man 2, and everybody's like, yeah, that's probably going to be better than anything Xbox does this year. And
that's the thing.
Xbox hasn't covered yet.
They'll be right. I think one of the biggest things I can't remember who was talking about it, but they were talking about how the gaming industry, the AAA gaming industry, is bloating right now, and it's incredibly unsustainable. And I think that it's an interesting conversation to have when you're comparing these two vastly different companies and their approaches to tackling the problem of game bloat. And Sony hasn't really had it, like, because Game Pass is unsustainable in its current form right now. But I think it was David Jaffe that said Sony's approach to gaming is almost unsustainable as well. How insanely bloated these games are starting to get. Luckily Sony has amazing teams in Insomniac, Naughty Dog, the other guy. But it's like they have incredible studios that are putting out banger games. But the thing that you want to look at is they David Jaffe went through and like looked at all of the first party exclusives by generation, and it's like PlayStation 1 had a ton of them, and then by PlayStation 2 it was like a drop of 30%, and then PlayStation 3 was a drop of like 20%, and then PlayStation 3 it was like a 98, or PlayStation 4 is like a 98% drop, and then PlayStation 5 was like a 20% drop from that. So it's like you have it's like these games are selling, you're putting all of your money into it, but there's less games to buy, so you're not getting that dopamine, that money income, like as rapidly as you would like. And they are recouping their costs, but what happens when they don't? Like, what
Yeah.
happens if they get their own Redfall? Because I don't think Spider-Man 2 has a chance in hell of being a Redfall.
Yeah,
That
like what
game's gonna be
happens if
Game of
you
the Year
have
probably.
essentially like 3 or 4 straight Days Gone level performances, right?
Hey, I wouldn't even say Days Gone, because Days Gone I think was okay. I think if you're
No,
looking
but
at like Order
it's
1886,
not Horizon, it's not God of War. Like we're talking like
Mhm.
if it does like if the next 3 or 4 big games that they put out are like at best half the sales of these other games, like what do you do at that point? Like that's the thing is at
Mhm.
some point what goes up has to come down. Like as much as we're loving everything Sony's doing right now, I'm still waiting for the one that's just an absolute dumpster fire that doesn't work out. And it hasn't quite happened yet. Days Gone is the closest to me, but I think that was more of just like a mediocre, like, meh, it's fine, whatever.
Drive
It's in the
Club.
same way of like when MCU
Yeah,
movies,
Drive
when there's
Club.
like the odd one that's like, that was okay. And then the next one just ends up being amazing. And you're like, all right, well, things are back to normal again. At some point, Sony's going to have that issue where the model they're doing can only have so many bangers before eventually they've got to come down too. Everything has to come back to the center at some point.
I'm
I
gonna
think-
like raise I'm gonna raise that one argument because you said like the MCU example, and for me, I'm burnt out on the MCU. I
I'm
find
talking before Endgame, like we're like
100%.
before the Dark World came out and people were like, eh. But then you
But
have
what
like
I'm-
Captain America
geez,
Winter
what I'm
Soldier,
saying-
and everybody's
what I'm
like,
saying
all right,
with
we're
this-
good.
what I'm saying with the MCU though, with that analogy, is that they've become so mediocre, and like the expectation now is that an MCU movie is going to be at best okay. So like there's less hype, there's less interest, and I worry that that's what's going to happen to Xbox, and that Xbox is going to come out and be like, hey guys, we got Fable, and everyone's going to be like, okay, cool, we've seen what else you guys are making, we're not excited for that, because the expectation now from an Xbox game is that it's going to be okay, it'll be fine. Chris, you've kind of been quiet this time. I'll let you jump in because you haven't had a chance to jump in on this argument. Where do you fall on this?
So I'm interesting because I think I have a different opinion than everybody. Well, not different, but like a different approach than everybody. Because for me, I don't really think about the systems like, well, okay, well, people we're going to stop using their Xboxes because there hasn't been a new Gears of War out.
Mhm.
People are stopping using their PS5s because there's no Spider-Man 3 yet or whatever may happen, right? Because I'm not, obviously, and I'm not in the business or anything like that, but a lot of the revenue from these systems don't even really come from their first party titles. That's a huge part of it, but they also get 30% of the revenue of every game sold on their stores. So it's not necessarily just like, oh, we've got to make sure there's a Halo, because if we don't, we're going to have no money coming in. And it really was like you would buy an Xbox, you would buy a PlayStation because of the exclusives, and then everything beyond there is where the real money would then just trickle in every single day, right? Because you're not going to sell Spider-Man 2 every day forever. Eventually that's going to go down, but you have the Jedi Survivors, the Hogwarts Legacies, and all of that kind of stuff releasing on your console, and that does really well, and you get 30% of all the sales, right? So what I think has happened is kind of with Microsoft is maybe their approach has changed, and that's why we're kind of seeing it this way, because they're not trying to necessarily sell as many Xboxes, right? They're more trying to sell the Game Pass and everything. And when they're making a AAA title, they're no longer trying to compete with Sony of like, well, we got to make sure we get the Hogwarts Legacy and all that kind of sales, because they know everybody's going to buy a PS5 for those exclusives. So when it comes to that 30% revenue, they kind of would get hurt, right? Because they don't have the same exclusives. They're going to sell less consoles. And then that 30% revenue flowing in from their store just won't compete. They're not going to make the same kind of money back. Now that they have Game Pass, they're more making their AAA titles to keep people interested in that service, right? Because it's the day one releases. Halo's coming out. Cool. I'm not going to cancel my Game Pass because it's coming out. I'm going to still have it. Cool. I'm going to keep buying it every month because there's this thing here keeping me there. And first, I'm sure that just maybe it's management, all that kind of stuff. They've bought all of these teams. They're spread too thin. and they just aren't able to get these games kind of going. They're in their heads, they're probably like, perfect, we have like 25 studios or whatever the heck they have now. Best case, every year we have like 3 banger games coming out that are pretty big, because why wouldn't it work out that way? And obviously it hasn't. So I'm sure there's that behind the scenes. But that's why they're at the point now where it's like, okay, don't post about, the Xbox store as much. Don't post about our exclusives. We'll post about Game Pass and everything that's coming there. They don't even tell us once a month what's coming. They do it every 2 weeks. Like, hey, middle of the month, here's all the stuff coming to Game Pass. End of the month, here's everything coming to Game Pass. And then when it's a big game coming out, like a Halo or something like that, they kind of just throw it in there, because now it's something coming to Game Pass, but they can tell you like 6 months in advance. So no longer is it just, oh, Lego Star Wars is coming to Game Pass in 2 weeks. Cool, I'll hold on to it. But also, Forza Motorsport's coming out in 3 months. I'll hold on to it too. So I think that just their strategy of AAA games is kind of going through now. And this is kind of what it looks like for them, because, is it the same as Sony's? Absolutely not. Are they making the same store revenue? Probably not, just from people who already have their Xbox, because they already did. They're already in the ecosystem. But they're more just trying to keep that Game Pass afloat, and it's causing them to not focus as hard as Sony does on the AAA games, because Sony needs those AAA games to get the revenue in their store, and of course that 30%, where Game Pass, sure, I'm sure some people buy stuff on Xbox, they get that bit of 30% revenue in, but when Hi-Fi Rush isn't doing as well, they're like, I don't care, it was on Game Pass, everybody stayed subscribed that day
for that month. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and then keep in mind, like, until we if we actually know like the numbers, the hard data, like, which we would never get, it's hard for us to know specifically what they think about it without them outright telling us. I mean, sure, Phil Spencer mentioning that, Redfall didn't meet the standards they were hoping to, and blah-de-da, but like, keep in mind that for us especially, like, we're looking at this from a lens of, well, they haven't really been putting a lot of like top end games out that have been doing very well. It may be a factor. Like, I wonder if we ask like somebody who's like 14 if they give a shit about that, because we've been used to the massive like AAA, and those games are a big deal. Like, we remember the days when Halo was a huge thing, when Mass Effect was a huge thing, when Uncharted first happened. Like, when the Uncharted 2 trailer got dropped for the first time at E3, people flip the fuck out. So like, we're used to the marquee. It's almost like when we see the big movies of the year, like when we see the next James Bond movie, or when Top Gun gets brought out, or I guess Creed now. Like, we all see what the big movies of the year are going to be. The industry maybe right now is not actually swinging that way. I mean, sure, on Sony's side, that's their business model. Microsoft, it may just be that for us personally, like, they're doing what they're okay with right now, and we're just used to a different side of things, so we're not doing it. Because maybe this goes away if Redfall is a marquee game, and if Halo didn't, or met the expectations that people were expecting of. If a couple of these things hit better, maybe this conversation doesn't happen at all. But because some of these games have not lived up to the standards I think that we've traditionally held that AAA standard to, it's for the same reason that, like, whenever Ubisoft or EA makes a game these days, we kind of just brush it off now because we're used to them being mediocre. Whereas with Microsoft's arguably the biggest gaming company in the entire industry. We expect better. So when it doesn't come up, you kind of sit there and be like, well, you guys should be better. Whereas, Ubisoft and EA, we realize, well, we know exactly what they're all about now. It's fine. Microsoft, we still don't really know what it is at this point, because they keep, as we said at the top of this conversation, they're always innovating. They're always trying to change the game. So it's not as easy to pin them down. Whereas Sony, we've been able to pin down for a few generations now. And Nintendo, we just let them do what they're doing because clearly it works, because the Switch is one of the best-selling consoles, no matter how many bad things I have to say about it.
I really like how Chris brought up the 30% rips, because I kind of just let that fly by in my my little tirade that I had, but I think that that's incredibly important to whenever you're trying to get perspective on what Sony's doing about all of this, especially with how they are treating the Activision merger or deal, I mean, which I guess isn't even going to go through. So I look forward to the Chinese Call of Duty that we're going to get in like 4 years. But I think that it's incredibly important, because Sony has been able to sit on that 30% rip, and even if Microsoft has the control of Call of Duty, even the idea that not having that 30% like kind of pillow is so scary and devastating that they decided to make themselves look totally foolish for a year, which turns out in hindsight is not as foolish because now it's, even though none of Sony's arguments were used to block the deal in any way, it's like, okay, well, they definitely, were the canary in the coal mine for all of this. And I think that Microsoft absolutely knows that they're not making as nearly as much money off of the as much as Sony is from the 30% because Sony has so much more of the pie, right? They have way more players that are over there on Sony's side. And one thing that people attribute that to, which is retroactive, but it's that Microsoft is training, air quotes, training people to not buy games. And I think it's less that and more that they're training people to think about buying games differently. Where, like, I mean, I guess I'm an anomaly because I have so many games on my Xbox, but um you see a lot of people that are hoping games come to Game Pass, but they have this money that they are saving because of Game Pass. If you play one AAA game, like one EA game that drops on there, you're saving that much money that can be used to allocate towards whatever other kind of experience that you want, but whether it be microtransactions in Apex or whatever the hell you want to do, right? And I wonder what Sony's going to do about that whenever Microsoft slowly kind of creeps into this ecosystem with more and more people subscribing to Game Pass, which it seems like on the console side is plateaued, but they're looking at the PC space, and that's kind of something that they're trying to worm their way into and, like, with their decrepit fingers, coax the Sony and Nintendo people over, like, you got computers, don't you? Don't you want to play Minecraft over here? Or whatever. It's like, you know that they have the giant money back behind them, but they're also going to slowly encroach into this ecosystem, whether anyone likes it or not. And as long as they keep with this Game Pass model, eventually it's going to have to, something's going to have to give on one side or another.
Well, it's interesting you say that too, because, like, I know Chris and I are in the situation that we have all three of the major consoles. It's kind of a nice compliment to each other because, I mean, I don't really play much with my Switch at this point, but between my Series X and my PS5, it works out great because the Series X has so many games that I don't have to pay for. I can go over to Sony and be like, hey, here's this game that I can only get here. Yeah, I can throw money at that because I'm saving money doing this other thing too. So, like, in a way, the two kind of competing against each other is also creating, again, as a consumer, a nice alternative because it's giving me a chance to synchronize between the two, and it works out perfectly as well.
They're kind of hoping also, I think, on the famous, forgetting about subscriptions. I think I'm paying for Planet Fitness still to this day, and I don't think I've touched a weight in, like, maybe 4 years. I'm pretty sure. But
well, that's what I was going to say. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Nave. Go ahead.
I was just saying that with the subscriptions, a lot of people, they attribute the huge subscription number for Game Pass to the, pay $1 and it converts all your gold into Game Pass Ultimate for free, and people just stacked money on that, which, by the way, they still had to pay for the gold, right? Like, I don't know what everyone's complaining about. They definitely paid for the gold, but there are people like me who have been using reward points since the inception on the Xbox 360. I've been using I have like 300,000. I could buy an Xbox Series X with reward points right now if I wanted to. And I'm always buying Game Pass for friends, like my co-host who has a family and he doesn't have the money to be dropping on Redfall, which we're probably going to review at some point. Like, we're able to play on Game Pass because I had these reward points to give to him. And I haven't paid for gold in years. Maybe 7 years I haven't paid for gold, or a Game Pass Ultimate for that matter. And it's like, oh, look, you're taking money out of Microsoft's pocket, but the way that you get reward points is I'm spending money in the ecosystem, and they're rewarding me for giving them money. I'm getting like 1 point for every $10 that I'm giving them or something. So the fact that I have so many points. Yeah, it's an incredible amount of money. Not only that, but I'm also looking. There's ad space being sold on all of these consoles, which fucking sucks. But since it's there, we'll take it into the equation that all of this stuff is being integrated. Like they reward you for using Bing, so I use Bing on my phone instead of Googling stuff. I know I'm an idiot, but it's like sometimes I Bing Google, and that's all I do, and then I Google the thing. But it's like. They're doing all of these little, like, tiny little hoops for people like me who like to see the number go up and up to like further entrench me into the ecosystem, but also keep me spending money. Like I bought Jackass 3D and Jackass Forever because I got 2,000 reward points for a week because they were giving them away for buying movies. And it's like there are people like me out there that think they're gaming the system, but really they're just giving Microsoft more money than they would have if I had just outright bought the Game Pass. And I don't know. There's something to be said about that, I think.
I think Chris kind of nailed it. Like, I think he made a really compelling case in that, like, the two companies are battling for different things. Sony is battling for that 30%, that 30% like revenue from the games being sold on their console. And for them, what's bringing people to those consoles are those exclusives, right? You're not buying PlayStation 5 so you can play Jedi Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor. Like, sure, that's great, but like you could play that on Xbox or you could play that on PlayStation. So they're bringing people in with those exclusives and then making the money on that 30%. Xboxes, though, like Chris, you're totally right. The idea is their goal is not to sell games. It's not that 30%. It's to have that month to month subscription, that guaranteed income every month, even if it's less than what the 30% fee is that they get for selling the games. And so what Xbox is probably striving to do is not necessarily to say, hey, we have the best games, come here, but just that there's always something every month to justify why you're playing it. I don't necessarily know if it needs to, like, it raises this thing of like, they don't necessarily need to be the best game. They don't have to be the greatest game to pull people over, but they just need to have enough that, hey, I'm already subscribed, I'm going to stay subscribed for one more month, and then they get it. So I think what I worry and what I maybe see happening is that Xbox might start focusing more on quantity and that having more games every month rather than having the best games every month. Like, Sony kind of goes ebbs and flows. Like, hey, you get 2, maybe 3 amazing PlayStation games a year if you're lucky. But there's always something in between, and you're already in that ecosystem. So whatever, I'm going to buy it there. And that's what I'm in that camp. That's me.
Yeah.
Xbox is more just like, hey, every month there's something. And I think Adam falls in that camp where there's nothing that he's compelled to. He's nothing that he's like, oh, I'm buying Game Pass for this game. Rather, he's just saying, I've got so much that there's always something to play. And that's the revenue that they're going for. It's not necessarily quality. And I'm not
they
saying
don't necessarily want
yeah.
me to get anything specifically. They just want me in the room.
Exactly. And I'm not saying like there's not quality. There's definitely quality to be had, but it's not that,
It's
oh my
untapped
God,
quality.
you need to go. Yeah, it's just like, hey, there's enough that something's going to be good, and Adam's going to be like, yeah, you know what? I'll find something to play. I'll find
And the
something.
idea
And
too is that because there's so much there, it means when something hits, it's something,
Mhm.
especially when it's newer ideas, like something like an Inscription, something like a Crosscode, something like a Beacon Pines. Like when something does really well, all of a sudden people can point to that and be like, all right, we have 10 billion studios that we keep acquiring every couple of months. Let's give them this and see if they can do something with that kind of idea. Maybe we can turn this into a big new IP, or maybe we can do something with this later. At the very least, what it's giving them is the chance to experiment. Even if whether it's from the business end or from the consumer end, we're both getting something experimented out of this, because a lot of different ideas are getting floated around and we're seeing which one of them work in the markets. Because there are so many games now that are suddenly becoming popular because they're available to people that doesn't cost them like $30, $40, and no one would take a chance on that. You know, Rocket League is a juggernaut now because it was put free on PlayStation Plus that one month. You know, stuff like that doesn't happen often if it's got a $30 price tag on it. So with Game Pass, it's allowing the opportunity for studios to become famous, which means more bigger name games out there that they can sell on their consoles. That's why Sony puts the odd game like that for free, because if that succeeds, that's another studio that they can now put a game on for full price on their ecosystem, and they make that 30%. So there really is a lot to these systems that has a net positive. It's a matter of if you as a business can take the possible negatives that come with it at this time. And with Microsoft having the funds that they do, they can at this point until they decide not to.
I just worry, and I don't want Netflix. I don't want Xbox to become a Netflix, right? Especially as more and more studios see the benefits, and we see that already with like Ubisoft Plus and everything. Like, I don't want it to become like it's a glory day right now in the same way Netflix was in its golden age, where it was like, hey, we're the kings on this block. No one else is doing this, and it was great. But I don't want it to become like a Netflix situation where it starts just pushing out content for the sake of having content, not necessarily for quality. And that's kind
Well,
of
but it's
my
not
concern.
necessarily them making the content, which is what makes it different, is that
Mhm.
it's all these different independent studios with no direction from Microsoft that are putting these things
Mhm.
on the system. So I don't think it's the same. And we're not going to get to a case either, I don't think, where there's going to be too many subscription systems for gaming, because let's be honest, there's only 3 because there's 3 consoles. If anybody else tried Stadia, it doesn't work. Ubisoft Plus clearly is not working. EA Play is now part of Microsoft's Game Pass. So like clearly there's not going to be an oversaturation in terms of like how we have with Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, what's the Peacock, HBO Max. Like there's all of these different ones, and we're not even counting regional ones like us having Crave here in Canada, where there's just so much there. Here, we don't have to worry about it in the gaming industry because it's really only going to be 3, and it's dependent on the console you buy. It's not like Xbox is going to have, well, maybe, who knows, maybe Xbox will, but Xbox only has Game Pass. They don't have PlayStation Plus on there as well. Nintendo Expansion Pass is not there. Ubisoft Plus, I don't, or is it now on? I don't know. I can never keep up with this stuff anymore.
I think another important thing is that I know that a lot of things that Phil Spencer said in that recent interview on Kind of Funny have been kind of taken out of context, and it loops around a lot of the things that we were just talking about. My head's going in like a million different directions right now, but one of the things specifically about that, he was talking about how if they make an amazing AAA game, it's not necessarily going to sell consoles, and that sounds
Mhm.
like a silly statement by itself out of context, but he was talking about that within this ecosystem of them losing the console war in quotes, well, in the Xbox One generation, where everyone got entrenched into the digital markets. And in that situation, I do definitely agree. Where like people were pointing at the Wii U, I think that's kind of a false equivalency because they were still it was a digital marketplace, but whenever they moved to the Switch, it was a complete cutoff, and then
Yeah.
they moved into a new digital marketplace. Whereas everything from here, Xbox One and PlayStation 4 on, is carrying over through backwards compatibility, and smart delivery and stuff like that. Where so it's a false equivalency, but we are really seeing the pain points on Microsoft's end with the support in third parties with like Square Enix and stuff like that. And you have to look at where like you have to look at what's going wrong right there. Like is because people are thinking that Sony's money hatting. I think that maybe it's something to do with Game Pass itself because Square Enix used to be a huge supporter of Game Pass. All the Final Fantasies were on Game Pass for a time, and that's where my co-host played a bunch of them for the first time. And it's like, do we get to a point where the Game Pass bag becomes an extortion bag on the other end, where the companies, the publishers, they know that Game Pass needs to feed this beast, so they are raising their prices to a point where Microsoft doesn't want to do business with them anymore.
Well, they're also risking they're like Square Enix risks whenever they put a game on Game Pass. Like they're taking that front end paycheck instead of the sales, and depending on what game they have, like they'd probably not want to put like their new Final Fantasy because they know that that's going to sell like gangbusters.
Yeah.
And so for them, they're gonna be like, no, we'll take the risk of putting it on disc and getting the sales from that rather than Xbox, which I assume if I was a business person, I would be lowballing because I don't want to pay more for a game on my system more than I have to, or like more than I think it'll bring in revenue. Like, is Final Fantasy gonna bring in more people to Game Pass? I don't think so. Not
Yes,
a
it would.
drastic amount. No, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry,
Yakuza
yeah,
did it.
like yeah, fair enough. Like that would, but I like there's like a certain amount that like one
Especially
game
in
or
the
two games may
Japanese
not be
market,
enough.
if like suddenly the next Dragon Quest got put on Game Pass day one, that would bring so many eyes to it.
And I think
It
another
it
important
would.
thing to staple onto that is that Game Pass included in that is the cloud compatibility, playing the games on your phone and on your computer and stuff like
That's
that,
fair.
or
That's
not
a very fair point.
downloading, and that's huge in
Yeah.
Asia.
But I guess from like a developer and publisher standpoint is like you have to look at like what am I like you're removing the risk of like, hey, I'm going to make this game and it may not sell the amount I want. I'm taking that front end paycheck of just Game Pass saying we'll give you X amount and I don't know what the value is. But they have to assess that, and I think that depends. Like studios will look at it and say, hey, how much do we believe in this game? Do we want to take the money up front and reduce the risk, or do we want to take the risk and the idea that we can make more money selling it as a standalone game? Because I can't imagine a game that goes on Game Pass does as well from a sales perspective as one like Jedi Fallen Order, which was not on Jedi Survivor, which was not on Game Pass. selling versus if it had gone on Game Pass, because I don't think the Xbox crowd would have paid for it. They would have just said, hey, it's on Game Pass, I'll just play it there.
Yeah, I think a lot of because there's a lot of people that you're not going to win over, especially like whenever you're talking about people who are entrenched in like console wars and stuff like that. But it's anecdotal, but I have a lot of friends who are like, no, they don't subscribe to Game Pass because they want to own their games or like and
That's
stuff
me.
like that. And this is the thing though, you. This is the thing,
I'm the problem.
Kaylan. Well, no, but it's like you can still buy the games, and so
Yeah,
I don't
100%.
understand what the big deal. If you're playing a game, I did it with the Yakuza series. I didn't play them. I mean, I knew I was gonna want them, so I just bought them anyway. So, but I clearly spend a lot of money on games, and whenever I play a game on Game Pass, one thing that I like to do, which I've done a lot with Signalis, is that I bought the game for like 9 or 10 of my friends and like maybe 1 or 2 people on Twitter just on Switch, like giving them Switch money to buy Signalis because I believed in this game so much. And it was because of Game Pass. The same thing with the game called Valhalla. I played on PC Game Pass. An absolute amazing
The
bartender.
cyberpunk like bar game.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. And I own it on Switch now too. So it's like there's so much like kind of cross compatibility, and you're looking at when you're looking at Game Pass, especially whenever you're talking about AAA games and your belief in them. I think that Game Pass definitely is a renaissance for AA and indie developers to be able to get their foot in the door and establish something incredible for a very low barrier of entry on the consumer's part, which is the easiest way to. This is like how you get your next Squid Game or whatever the kids are watching these days.
Yeah, I think with Kaylan, like if you're looking at Game Pass, like you should be looking at Game Pass not as here's where I buy all my games, but here's where I can experiment and go outside of things I would never try. And then if you want to support other things and buy them, like you can still do that. Because like Coffee Talk episode 2 was on Game Pass. Still bought it because I felt like they deserved the money. And because I had the chance to try them without that. And the same goes for Toge Productions as a whole. There's a game called A Space for the Unbound that I tried out for free because it was on there. Loved it. And because of that, the next game they put out with Coffee Talk, I'm like, screw it. You guys have earned my money. Like, you guys gave me an amazing production. I didn't pay you a cent. So here, this is what you get. So it gives you the opportunity to give studios a chance you would never give the light of day. And then maybe the next time something comes out, that gives you the opportunity to be like, okay, you're the one I'm spending money on.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But if we're looking at it from like a company point of view, which I think we all established that we're not very literate as far as
I don't care about their point
finances
of view.
and
It's
stuff like
working
that.
for me. That's all I care about.
I also kind of take that stance, but like from a enthusiast standpoint, from a gaming enthusiast, I do see why people are worried about what Game Pass is doing to the ecosystem. But the one thing that I would like to say is like you can't be too conservative with things like that, because if you stagnate, then you fall behind. And you kind of saw that with Sony kind of with their first party games whenever they started becoming the meme of over the shoulder third person sad dad simulator, and
They
that
still
was
are
all their
that.
games. I mean,
still
but
are
I mean, it's a meme, and I love making that joke. But like in all seriousness, the games are amazing, and they're obviously selling gangbusters. But it's like when you start stagnating, it becomes very noticeable, especially whenever you only release like 2 games a year, which is what the AAA industry's kind of devolved into. And so it's like uh the adrenaline shot that this Game Pass thing is putting into the game industry, we don't know if it's going to be positive or negative. We don't know if it's going to be the next Xbox Live innovation or if it's going to be the App Store race to the bottom kind of thing that happened that crushed mobile gaming. And we can only kind of cross our fingers and put our money where our mouths are and support the things that we want to support. And if you and fortunately for Sony, they make a quality product without doing anything like besides making the games that they have. Microsoft is in a different situation because they're woefully inadequate at managing their damn studios. And we're still in the incubation period of all of this Bethesda stuff and all of these acquisitions. Everyone's still trying to get their things together. We're starting to see the fruits of our labor as if I work at Microsoft, but they're starting to see the fruits
He's a
of the
plant,
labor.
guys.
He's a play.
They have like Hi-Fi Rush and stuff, but even then, Hi-Fi Rush I think was in development before the acquisition of Bethesda, or like at least it was in like the talking stage and got greenlit. But like we're looking at Hi-Fi Rush, we're looking at like adding boss battles to Psychonauts, and we're looking at Pentiment and Grounded, and it's like this ecosystem is becoming an enthusiast's ecosystem. And I think that that's probably why I appreciate it so much. Me and Adam have been talking a lot about indie games. He's speaking directly to my heart with all these
Yeah,
references
I'm
he's
fully on
saying.
board with this. I don't think the AAA market is becoming as much of a big deal anymore because Game Pass is allowing the opportunity for AA and indie to show their stuff now. So is it necessarily a problem that AAA games aren't performing? It may not necessarily be that. It may be because they're stagnating and the load is now being picked up by the smaller developers that are coming out with the fresher ideas.
Yeah, you have to you have to really wonder if like can Grounded sell a system, or can Hi-Fi Rush, like I don't think any of these games in a vacuum are going to sell a system. I think
Or
it's
do they
going to
even
be
have to?
I think, or yeah, correct, because of PC Game Pass and all of that. But I think that the swath of these games like coming out and being darlings, I think that that is speaking to a specific subset of gamer, and that is not the mainstream gamer. Whenever you think of AAA games, you're just pretty much always going to be synonymous with Sony. Because that's where Call of Duty's hang its hat, and that's where a lot of things kind of moved over there whenever when it was clear that the majority of gamers were going to that platform. And it's it's uh it's a different strategy. And I don't know, I as much as I'm nervous about the future of gaming because of it, it's never been more interesting seeing
Oh
how
yeah.
shaken up this has all been.
Like even just look at like the games that the three of us, like minus you, Nave, that we've talked about like so much on the show. Me with Eastward and Coffee Talk, Tunic, I know Chris was big into, and obviously Kaylan with Cult of the Lamb. Like we're not like sure we're still talking about God of War, Ragnarok, and Horizon Forbidden West, or Last of Us Part 2, but we're spending so much more time than we used to in the PlayStation 3 days or PlayStation 4 days, where we talk about clearly the biggest games. Like PlayStation 2, I was either talking about the big Square Enix games on the block, or we were talking about, Medal of Honor when that was still, the big rage back in the day. Now it's
Scooby-Doo
not,
Night of a
it's not the
Thousand
same
Frights.
anymore. It's now like, also I'm really big in Horizon, but also I'm into this really small like series that's like coming out of Malaysia. Like it's now a different ecosystem now, that it's not just whatever E3 shows is what we're going to be talking about for the next 12 months. It's not necessarily that anymore.
I kind of liked Nave's argument of like maybe they're catering to different audiences in the sense of PlayStation is that mainstream gamer, like you're there for the big, $1 million+ that's even a thing, hundreds of millions of dollar production, and versus like Microsoft going for more that enthusiast crowd, right? This is for a lack, if you're thinking from a movie perspective, this is your art house crowd, right? Like they're gonna have some weird games, some small games you've never heard of from these developers you've never heard of, and that might resonate because like I think of myself, like I'm not huge into those like indie unheard of games. Like sure, I've played like Death's Door, Call to Lamb, like I do, but that's the rare occasion for me. For me, like I being a dad, like I don't have a lot of time for video games, especially to experiment. Like when I'm playing, I want to know that like I want to know what I'm getting. I want to know like kind of, I don't want to experiment. I don't want to like try out a bunch of games to find the ones that are good. Like I kind of want to just, hey, I'm playing a game that I know is going to resonate with me, that's going to have that big budget. And so for me, like I look to Sony because I just want to know that like I'm playing, for lack of a better way, I'm playing the cream of the crop. Like, right, these are like the high production value ones. I'm going to the movie because I want to see the big blockbuster. I'm going to PlayStation because I want to play that big blockbuster game. And so I think maybe what we're dealing with as a industry, as a hobby, is we're looking at a transformation of who Microsoft's audience is. Because before, Microsoft was the dude bro console, right? Like in the Xbox 360, everyone was going there to play, Gears of War, Halo. Like it was
the first person shooter console for sure.
It was the first person, and it was the mainstream.
Is.
It was the mainstream console though, right? If you think about it, Sony was the weird one doing like these weird like Journey, Flower, and stuff like that. Was the enthusiast one.
Oh, yeah.
And now we've switched where Sony's now the mainstream and Xbox is the enthusiast.
I would
Yeah,
love
go
to
ahead.
hammer home that point because that the entire PS3 generation for the first like 2/3 of it, they were struggling, right? Because Microsoft was dominating, and then Sony had to innovate and they had to get creative. They couldn't fight head on with what Microsoft was doing, so they had to go and skirt around and figure out something else. They had to come up with Journey and Flower, and they eventually came out with Uncharted and The Last of Us and Killzone, all or Killzone was PS2, but it's like they had all of
No, but
this new
Killzone didn't
stuff.
come into its own until PS3. Let's be real.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%.
God,
I mean,
the
I would
old
argue that
Killzones are
Killzone
so
never
bad.
came in, but that I also have bad taste. So
So I really like that you brought that up because we were talking about that before, how Microsoft is having to fight in a different kind of war against Sony because they're so entrenched in their in their first place spot. And I think that a strong Sony makes a more competitive Microsoft, and if Microsoft switches around, Sony's going to have to be the competitive one. The only thing that's the only anomaly is Nintendo, where they're kind of in their own little island because Sony decided to cede the handheld market to them because they were afraid that Vita was going to be the end of PlayStation Network as they knew it, which it kind of was a little bit, but for a few months. But
Nintendo's an island. It's doing its own thing.
Yeah,
it's not an island. Nintendo has its own continent. They have their Australia.
Still an island.
It's
Yeah, the
still just a
Hyrule
big
Island.
island, Adam. Jeez. Hyrule.
I would
Yeah.
like to talk about the audience though, the Microsoft Xbox audience, and kind of their anticipation turning into vitriol. You know what I mean? So at this point, it's hard to be Microsoft because with Redfall not doing well, coming out buggy, being a 6 out of 10 across the board, essentially, it's like this is the worst time for them to come out with a big swing and completely miss because they've just taken an uppercut right to the face because of this. Microsoft's hardcore fan base have been waiting for a very long time, and I understand how they feel. Something that Kaylan was saying at the very beginning of the show is that he doesn't think he's missing out on anything playing as a PlayStation gamer. And to be completely honest and frank with my own fan base, or not my fan base, but the fan base I'm a part of, also my fan base too. Quite a
Yeah,
few
it's your
of them.
fan base.
The I am the CEO of Xbox after all. The
Told you he was a plant.
the PlayStation guys are not missing anything because by not subscribing to Game Pass or playing over here on the Xbox ecosystem. And as much of a problem as that is, I forgot my point because of all those jokes we just made. I'm sure there was a point in there somewhere.
You're
Well,
not
we were
missing
talking
on any
about the
game
audience.
specifically. You're missing on at most a deal. That's
We were
really what
talking
it is
about-
right now.
We were talking about the audience and the idea that like Microsoft has switched from the dude bro to the enthusiast, and PlayStation's now almost the dude bro enthusiast
Yeah.
versus enthusiast.
Yeah, the audience. So the audience of Xbox has been going through a lot, and I think that that's why you're seeing such a huge backlash against Redfall. It's not particularly that Redfall is a buggy mess, but it's more that it is a buggy mess that is released in the drought in the middle of like a 5-year drought. You know, and
Yeah,
we're
like they
getting
want something to put up there to be like, see, Sony fanboys, it's not just you, and they don't have that ammunition.
No.
Yeah. And those people, unfortunately, these console warriors, you kind of need them a little bit because that's a pretty hardcore part of your fan base. Unfortunately, with every fan base, you're going to get these kind of crazy psychos that want to protect the corporation at all costs.
Yeah, you kind of want the
And-
vocal minority to be happy with you.
Well, you also want that group because they are your they're your advocates, right? Like I am for a lot of people, like not a lot. Let me step the back. I sound a lot more egotistical than I actually am. But like there are people like who are friends of mine or like family who aren't gamers, right? And so
Yeah.
they're like, "Hey, Kaylan, like my kid's asking for a console. Hey, I'm looking to get someone to get, like, people who aren't gamers are coming to these hardcore console war people, right? Like the enthusiasts, and they're asking, where do I get in? And if you're an Xbox person, you might be looking right, like if I'm at PlayStation, I'm like, yeah, go to PlayStation. It's got what you want. Granted, it's depending on like the person's needs and everything.
Yeah, it's really
but-
what they're looking for. Like if you want the best
But you need-
experience, you go to Sony, but if you're looking for like a good deal, you go to Microsoft.
Don't
that's
really
the
discount
depends what they're
Nintendo.
asking.
But what I'm saying is that like you want those console warriors on your side to be going and being like, yeah, you definitely should be getting a PlayStation or you should be getting an Xbox. And right now, I don't know. I'm starting to get swayed on the whole thing that like Xbox is now more of a enthusiast experimental machine of, hey, we're not promising everything here is going to be good, but there's gonna be some cool stuff. And I think that's maybe what Xbox fans need to kind of get to, or where their mind has to go, is that, hey, Starfield might not be good. Starfield might not be a AAA game, but it might do some cool stuff, right? And that's kind of, they need to stop looking at it like, hey, it's a first party Xbox game, I'm looking for high quality. No,
Yeah.
that's not what it is. It's,
Well, at the end of the day, they
hey,
would like to at
this
least
is
have
one of many.
something to pin to be like, okay, I'm already liking the experimentalist, like, enthusiast stuff, but also that game's pretty fucking good. Like, that's all
Yeah.
they're really looking for, is they want the cherry on top.
I'm
But I
gonna be
think that's the thing.
completely honest. If Starfield isn't like just a great Bethesda Studios game, I'm gonna be in full copium mode. I might just disappear for a month. Like that would be a lot
Look,
for me to have.
Bethesda's
To take
already
in.
on my I don't care about you list. If Starfield is also exactly what I think it is, as my opinion is right now, they are on my so I don't even need to pay attention to what you're doing list.
So that's BioWare with me. I'm so close. I think
Oh,
that's
God.
why I'm so.
We need you on for
attached to
another
Bethesda
episode
right now.
specifically just for this topic, and it'll just be you and me for the next like 5 hours.
I love being on. I love guesting on shows and ranting, but like, yeah, Bethesda. I think that's why they're so close to me. Fallout 4 wasn't it, and then Fallout, 76 was like, this isn't even close to what I want. And so if this happens again, I'm like so close to Anthem energy right now. I'm like, oh, I don't know about you.
Anthem. Game of the year, Anthem.
But I think this is the idea, is that like you guys have this idea that like Starfield's going to come out and it's going to be a massive AAA game, and I don't know if Game Pass supports that level of development or stuff. Like I think it, like the more and more we talk, the more and more I think of it as just like, hey, there's a bunch on here that something's going to resonate with somebody. Like it's not, there's some gems, there's a bunch of middle, but like it's not going to be, you don't get. I think with Xbox, it's like you're not going to get the high highs, but you're going to get like a constant where there's something in there, right? Like PlayStation is like, here's a good game and then there's nothing.
Yeah.
Good game and then there's nothing. Xbox is going to kind of be like this. There's always something, and it's going to vary what it's going to be, but you're not going to get the high highs and the droughts, because that's what PlayStation is.
Yeah, I mean, your opinion's going to be
droughts.
different based on what you're looking for with the console itself. So it really is going to depend. Like, I'm sure there are a bunch of people that own an Xbox that regret it, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people that own an Xbox that are over the fucking moon about it because they're so happy with how Game Pass is for them. Same with Sony. I'm sure a lot of people are like really happy with all the crazy games that we've gotten on that system, and then some of them are also being like, fuck, I have nothing to do for like 2 months every time I play this thing. Like, what am I doing? Like, anything that I want, like, sure, there's a bunch of sales here, but they're all games that I don't want to pay $30-$40 for.
I think
that's the
another
problem.
thing to hit on is that what we're speaking to is like, if you have more than one console, you're already a fraction of a percent. If you're listening to this podcast, you are clearly an enthusiast, and you are a fraction of a percent of the type of gamer. So we might be, for lack of a better term, preaching to the choir for a lot of people that are listening to the show. But when I mean, this is anecdotal, but you were talking about, you have people that are asking, hey, my kid wants to get a console, what do they want? And like, I have friends who, like, specifically I have a friend who I argue with all the time, who is just completely convinced that no game has come out this year. Like, he just every time I'm like, Dead Space remake, it's a remake. Well, Resident Evil 4 is a remake too, and it's great, but it's a remake. Have you even played the original games? No. Well, then what does it matter if it's a remake? Like,
It's new to me.
You have these people who, like, he only plays Apex and For Honor and Call of Duty Warzone, and that's it. And whenever you have those kinds of people, like, what am I trying to say? These people are not going to really be swayed by what kind of exclusives or what kind of indie darlings you have. Like, they're not really, they might see God of War Ragnarok and go, oh, I like Norse mythology, or they might see Starfield and be like, oh, cool, space is really awesome to me. But like, a lot of these people are kind of just, it's not that they're in the Xbox ecosystem and happy, or in the PlayStation ecosystem and upset. It's that they bought a console 10 years ago, and they're just like, this is fine. And then it's just
They're
like
just
people
looking
like
at what
me.
the biggest thing that's being advertised is currently.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's also like something for like the big exclusives that, like, one of the things that benefits from Sony is that people see those big games. Like, they see, like, when Ragnarok came out, like, you see those commercials on TV for the game. Like, you see the Spider-Man, like they show those games, and I don't think that resonates as much when you're trying to advertise Xbox. You can't be like, hey, here's Eastward. Like, it's not gonna, like, people aren't gonna go to Walmart and ask the cashier like, hey, I want to play that God of War game. like they're not going to go and be like, I want to play that Eastward game. Where do I play that? Like,
I think that that might be underselling a little bit. I mean, as far as Eastward's concerned, you're correct. But like, I'm thinking about this game called Valheim, which is super popular on Twitch. Like the Twitch ecosystem has really swung how people, especially young people, are buying video games. And I think that Game Pass can definitely cultivate to that audience. Are they doing it right now? I don't think so. They do have Valheim now on Xbox Game Pass, and they had it on PC Game Pass for a while. But it's like, these games that are being made at a fraction of a cost of God of War Ragnarok are making I don't want to say way more, but they are making way more money than they should be making.
Yeah.
Depending on how much money that was put into it. Like, you look at Stardew Valley, which is on Game Pass, I think,
Right.
still.
That sold
And it's
20 plus million.
And there's so many games that are thriving because of like these different cultures, like TikTok culture, that we're just completely oblivious to, and they aren't this centralized gaming gaming enthusiast ecosystem that we're catering to with our shows. But at the same time, these things are even more popular than we could even fathom. Like FIFA, I fucking have no idea. I don't even know what a soccer ball looks like. I couldn't even draw one for you. But like, FIFA is one of the biggest games, and it's like, where are these people? Like, I've never met a person that plays FIFA, but there's like billions of you.
Nave, the fact that you called it soccer, the people who play FIFA call it football.
Yeah.
Like, I'm already pissed off everybody.
You're not even in the same category. Yeah.
But it's definitely another, like, there's so many interesting angles. Like, this podcast going for another hour, and we would have more to say about like these different like ways to approach this problem.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's gonna be, as we said even at the top with the buggy like, it's a case by case. Everybody is gonna have their own different set of opinions on it, because what they're looking for is different from what we're looking for. The four of us clearly have like a much more enthusiast, it's not just a, I'm buying like this for Call of Duty and Madden and that's all I'm doing kind of habit. Like, we're looking at this from, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. The list is much bigger. Whereas we're comparing it to, say, like a family who has just got a couple of kids. They're not really big gamers. Or we have someone who's just, they really like strategy games and only strategy games. Like, it's impossible to really gauge it, which is why we don't have to work for these companies, because we sure as shit wouldn't be able to know. We don't have that data.
Yeah.
But imagine us
Speak for
being
yourself.
in
I
those
work for him.
Yeah, remember Nave's a plant.
He's actually just Phil Spencer in a
I was gonna say, I haven't seen him and Phil Spencer in the same room.
Well, you know
you can't
what?
see, but the shelf is like just to the left of that wall.
Well, I'm
It's
pretty
behind that
convinced that he
wall.
can't be Phil Spencer, because he hasn't changed his shirt at any point during this show, so we know it can't be.
That's what Phil Spencer would do to not be come across as
that's
Phil
how
Spencer.
he's hiding
Well,
in
He
plain
can't.
sight.
It's an addiction. He can't help himself.
It's the same way that
if
if I wanted to leave my family and disappear so they never find me, I'm just gonna shave my beard off and they won't even know what I look like.
Like, sure, I'll agree with the idea that he might be doing that as a plant, if you can agree that Chris at one point can actually like go without having a single cup of coffee in a day, and I'm pretty sure that's not possible.
I don't know how he's drinking a coffee at like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. Like,
I do what I want.
I drank one too, Chris. Don't worry, I'm with you on that. I had to
That's
put my glass away.
you guys with no kids having to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Oh, I envy your lives.
Oh, I'm a mailman.
Are
I
you
have to
really?
get up at 4. Yeah.
Oh man, that's crazy. You're like Newman from Seinfeld.
Yeah. It's not good. It's bad.
That's
sitch.
awesome. Cool. All right. Well, I think that's a good spot to wrap it up there. Nave, thank you so much for joining us. If the audience likes what they hear and they want to hear more of you, where can they find you? Where can they hear you? Give us all how can they find you?
I am one half of Gaming Together, a cooperative podcast where we talk about multiplayer games and we act a little crazy sometimes. We've kind of been on a low point because, like, recently, because my co-host was supposed to get deployed because he's in the military, but suddenly he's not. And so, like, we had this weird, like, we had no schedule, so we're just like playing by the seat of our pants. But if you look through the catalog, there's a whole bunch of games that you can look and see if you want a good review of. For the first half of every episode, though, we kind of bullshit. So even if it's a game that's story based, we won't spoil it for you for a while. You can find us at Game Together Pod on Twitter, which is where you'll find me. We have a Facebook that Philip runs. I have no idea how to get there. I don't understand Facebook at all because I'm not 50. But
Isn't that weird how that's evolved?
You're missing that boomer audience there.
Dude, Philip is like sends me memes from Facebook, and it is a completely different ecosystem.
Oh
over
my
there.
god, is he
Like,
sending
I
you
have
like
no
the
idea.
minions? Is he sending the minions memes?
Oh, there are minions. Oh,
Of course, there's minions in the Facebook memes.
there's minion memes, and they're talking about Yakuza, and he sends me all of them. And I wanna break my phone in half.
Awesome.
But at
Cool.
least when you do it, do you also pick it up like Kiryu does, where you just in slow motion?
I look at it sad, like Kiryu does. Like, I'm upset.
You have to do karaoke sessions afterwards.
Definitely, I
Awesome.
got the Rock Band drum set. You can't see it anymore because it's.
Oh, I'm fucking
midnight.
jealous
Oh,
because I wish
I
I
was
could in my
watching-
apartment. I have a set, but there's no way I'm going to be able to play that without pissing off everybody in the entire building.
I was gonna say, Nave is like the only person with a like guitar or Rock Band set still. Out
I
in
have
his
a
living room.
functioning Guitar Hero World Tour one, so
I've got Rock Band somewhere stuck in my parents' attic.
Yeah,
I
it's
have
at my parents' house
I
for
have
sure.
5 guitars over there in the corner. That's like $1,300 over there.
I mean,
Because those things are
I've just
rare
got
collector's
the
items.
real one. So
Yeah, I got you again right next to my Phil
That's-
Spencer shelf is my real guitars.
Adam, South Park has confirmed it. It's lame if you play real guitar.
It is.
that's okay. I'm not really meant to be that interesting anyway. So
Awesome. And ladies and gentlemen, as always, if you've enjoyed this and you want to hear more, we also you can find us at Linktree, linktr.ee/PixelPlay Podcast. You can find our Discords, our Twitter, Instagram, all that fun stuff there. Let us know what you think in terms of Microsoft. Are they hitting full stride? Are they going after a different audience? We'd love to hear your feedback. And if you want to find more of our episodes, you can find them there, wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube if you want to see our lovely faces as we do this. With that being
Direct all
said,
your Xbox hate at me. I thrive on it.
you were the one defending it here, buddy.
Yes.
Awesome. I've been one of your hosts, Kaylan, aka Catastrophe, joined as always by Adam at CS Radical and Chris at Gin and Chris, and making a special appearance, Nave at Game Together Pod. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and we will see all of you guys next week. Bye for now.